All right, hello and welcome to the 2021 State of Medical Device Virtual Summit. So this session is one of our favorite topics, which is audits. It's called Let's Get Back to Auditing Remotely. My name is Karen Schuyler. I'm a solutions engineer here at Greenlight Guru, and I will be your moderator for today's event. So before we jump into today's presentation and introduce Nicolle Cannon and her company, Cannon Quality Group, I'm going to talk about a few logistics. So first, this session is about 45 minutes long. It includes about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation in the box on the right-hand side. I will see them, and then we will get to as many of them as time permits. This entire session will be recorded, and slides will be available for you to download. I'd also like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on this free virtual summit. So our mission at Greenlight Guru is to improve the quality of life. As an organization that helps you bring safer, life-changing devices to market quicker and with less risk, we want to live that mission, whether that's through hosting free training sessions or through our award-winning medical device QMS software. And if you'd like to learn more about why medical device companies around the world are moving away from paper-based general-purpose quality management systems and adopting our purpose-built medical device quality management software, please head over to www.greenlight.guru after today's presentation, and we will schedule a free personalized one-on-one demo. So now on to today's presentation, let me give a proper introduction to your presenter today, Nicolle Cannon. Nicolle Cannon is founder and CEO of Cannon Quality Group, which is a full-service outsourced quality management organization specializing in supporting startups and early-stage medical device companies. She started her company over 10 years ago, and prior to that worked in quality for device companies such as Fox Hollow, Advanced Technologies, and AVE/Medtronic. She holds a degree in mechanical engineering from Cal Poly State University. So with that, let's get started, and I will hand it over to your presenter today, Nicolle Cannon.
Thanks, Kennedy. I'm running a little bit behind today. It's kind of funny. I don't know how all of you are handling this new world we're in, but one of the things that I've started doing is walking my dog a little bit more, which you would think wasn't going to be a big deal. I've had my dog. It's not a COVID dog, but she is not a fan of walking. And this morning, I actually had to hurry her along a little bit so that I could make it here and not to my home office. And she was not having it. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy I made it on time. I'm happy Kenny and I got a chance to chat before we got to meet with all of you. I'm sorry we're not in person. I look forward to when we can do it, but I'm glad we have this opportunity to do these remotely. And we're going to talk about audits. So let's talk about the beginning of 2020. I came into 2020. I talked to a lot of my colleagues. My focus in 2020 was to help organizations really stick to their plan and get audits and their quality program running on track versus wait until Q4. Over the last 10 years, I've kind of noticed all of us, some of us in the quality regulatory realm, we tend to kind of wait until Q4. We're hopeful all year, and we think Q4 will get our audits done. So I came into 2020 like resolute. We're gonna have our audits on track. We're gonna put a plan in place. Let's do this. I was thinking I'm gonna handle this. So that's my resolution. And I went into the year, and by February, I had my plans and my schedules rolling. My Q1 internal audits were underway. I was helping organizations get on track. We had our notified body audit scheduled. I was feeling good. People were feeling good. The clients were feeling good. And then March came. And as we all know, I think we all took a pause. A lot of our organizations stopped. A lot of them stopped out of necessity, started pivoting for their product lines. None of us honestly knew what was in store. We had to make some quick shifts. We had to start thinking about other priorities than our plans for audits. And those all took the back burner. Supplier audits, we didn't know which suppliers were going to be applicable anymore. Internal audits just were not a priority. And notified body audits and external body audits, those just went up in the air. Nobody knew what was going to happen. External bodies didn't know what to do. So we all kind of went on pause, and 6 months flew by, and all our resolute plans for the year kind of just, I don't know about you, but this is what I did. I was like, okay, we're done. And then at the end of Q3, we started dusting them off and realizing this state of flux is our norm right now. and we need to help people get back. I've done some remote audits over the last 6 months and 9 months now, sorry, the months are going by. And I've learned some things, and our organization has learned some things, and I'm seeing people hesitant. And what I wanted to do today was talk about how we can get back on track, how we can help organizations get running their internal audit programs, get running their supplier programs, get comfortable and ready for those external bodies. Some of you have had them already. They're certainly comfortable in coming back to it. And so as we proceed and get businesses back to some sort of stable, I know we still have a lot of flux going on. A lot of organizations are still pivoting. A lot of us are still trying to figure out how to manufacture with social distancing, different times, get supplies in on time, pivot our product lines to support EUAs, and still we need to get our maintenance programs back on track. So while we live through the chaos, today we're going to try and figure out, we're going to talk about 4 steps that I'm going to recommend to help us kind of get back on track, help our organizations feel comfortable to get into internal audits, not just us as leaders, but also our organization. So the first step that we're going to talk about is assessing. And one thing that we're going to assess, and you're going to see this next slide quite a bit during today, is we need to think about, is it an internal audit, a supplier audit, or an external body audit? All 3 of those have a different focus. There's nuggets that apply to all of them, but I want to carry that theme while we're preparing and we're assessing, make sure we're thinking about which audit we're talking about. And some of the things to think about as we're assessing if the organization is ready for a remote audit, has anybody had a remote audit? Has anybody done one? Now, some people in the supplier program have done desk audits. Those are not quite the same, but it's at least a launching point. It's something to bring forward and carry forward. So in this assessment phase, when you think about which audit you're talking about, internal, supplier, external body, let's think about internal. A lot of you, if you're in this program, you probably are on Greenlight, so you have your EQMS, yet some of you I know maybe you recently purchased an organization that's still on paper, and they're going to be part of your internal audit program. And this applies to suppliers. A lot of our suppliers aren't on electronic. So how are we going to set up our remote audit to support an organization that might be paper, or might be hybrid, it's manufacturing or it's not manufacturing, it's in a different time zone. So these are the things, like, think about when you're assessing, just think about the variables. We'll get into planning and preparing, but the assessment part is to sit down with your organization, brainstorm, because the more that you get the other people involved that are going to be part of your audit, at least from the quality team first, the more comfortable you're going to feel that you've covered your bases. So are the SOPs, some of the other things to think about, are the SOPs written for paper, or maybe some people shifted during this pandemic to electronic pretty quickly, but their SOPs didn't shift. Again, I'm seeing that in suppliers and acquired small companies. The next thing to start thinking about, is there a comfortable video platform that the organization is used or your auditor is used? So these have either your supplier or you and your internal program use them. Has the external body, do they have a platform they're comfortable with? These are things that start fleshing out in the assessment, because they're going to be tools and things we need to plan for and prepare with. So sit the team down, brainstorm which audit we're talking about, and let's think about these variables of working through the documents, working through the tours, working through the platform, and we're going to dive a little deeper now into each of them. So after we assess, we're going to start planning. And again, you're going to see the slide, because we just want to keep our focus for internal, supplier, and external. And as we're talking, you can be thinking about this for maybe one example in your organization. If we're going to do internal audits remotely, supplier audits, or external audits. The first thing that I want to plan is the agenda and flow. Up until now, I think we can get pretty rote with our agendas. It's pretty common, pretty consistent, but now we have to kind of flip those upside down and think about what is the agenda and flow given the variables that we just assessed? For example, with a supplier or a division that's on paper, are you going to break up the audit over a course of a day of days? Maybe are we going to let the auditors read SOPs ahead of time, give them in the suppository, and then at the end of the day, the auditor will give us records they want us to review, take a break, come back the next day. So this 8 hours of auditing may need to shift. How do we want to split this up so it's most effective and conducive for the organization, for both your people and whether they're auditing or the auditees? So we're going to think about in our audit agenda and flow, where's document reading, where's record review, where's physical inspection, and how can we break this up in a way to manage both our time and our team. We either going to need, if we're going to not split it up, we may need more people, whether it's on, I'm thinking about a supplier audit, for example, that maybe is on paper. And if we stick to our normal process where we're going to read an SOP and we're going to look at records, they may need somebody sitting on the screen with you and then somebody else off scanning. You have to think about how are we going to split this up? How are we going to do the tour? And so once we get a sense of what the team feels like would be a good way to break up the agenda and flow, now we want to talk. We want to talk whether it's with the auditor, whether it's your team that wants to sit with the external body auditor or an internal audit auditor and negotiate what's our schedule going to be and what's the flow. Can we break this up in this manner? Here's what we propose that we're going to do to manage our audit content and our split hybrid on-site, off-site, and the auditor's time and time zones. I had an audit this year. I was on the West Coast and the auditor was in Paris. And so managing how we were going to support an audit while I was up from midnight day. And I have to tell you, I'm not somebody who's ever done an all-nighter. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. I did it, but it's things that factor in when you're planning, especially if you're planning it for your team, to think about those things. If they're going to have to stay up all night, how are we going to nurture their supporting and being on their best to be for the auditor? How are we going to feed them? You'll hear me think about that a little bit through this. I know normally we have, people might think that's extraneous, but usually we this is all part of auditing, kind of setting up the course of the day, keeping the auditor comfortable, keeping the auditees comfortable. And again, each of these scenarios, you're in some different seat, whether it's an internal audit, a supplier audit, or an external body audit. We really want the best of everybody in those moments. So we're going to think through those things in assessment. And now we're going to plan, given what we know about each scenario, time zones, paper or electronic, experience with remote, experience with quality systems. So the next piece after we've done flow is additional things to think about. So that when we move into the preparation side, we're going to be able to organize that appropriately. One of the first things that I think about is the room. When it's a physical on-site, we make sure our whiteboards are clean. We have food set, again, I'm gonna bring up food. We have food set up at different times of the day to make sure that the auditor and auditee stay nourished. And then most of you, I'm sure, auditors are just gonna wanna plow through. Nobody wants to stop for food. So I think we're gonna have to think about these things and caretake. Maybe we get it delivered to them. And then the thing to think about is who's documenting. Sometimes we have somebody sitting in the room recording what's given to the auditor, questions that come up, maybe things that they see that we want to, our own team sees that we want to make sure are covered. Plus there's dialogue. These are things that in a person on-site situation is totally different than off-site. So whiteboard, you're not going to need to worry about a whiteboard, but what's behind your team, whoever's going to be interacting with the auditor, make sure they have some clean situation, right? Whether it's a screen or they don't have something obscene up there or inappropriate up there. Not that people would have things that you don't want up there, but maybe they have a whiteboard where they're sketching designs. We don't want that up there. But they may also want a whiteboard app so you can work with the auditor. You may need to be sketching things or drawing things. There's a lot of whiteboard apps that you can download, and again, they're going to need to test through. We'll get to that point. So do you do certain parts of your audit team? And now I'm thinking about external body audits, but again, it applies with internal body audits. When you're doing certain content, whether it's design or manufacturing, sometimes you need to do a visual representation. The next thing to think about is the files. How will we stage them? Even if you're on electronic, I mean, paper, there's a lot to think about. Electronic still, where are we going to be negotiating? Is it all in our electronic management system? Are we in a hybrid system? Is everybody going to be communicating from the same place? How do we know what we shared? You know, how can we record what we shared? And then are we going to have the auditors, more importantly, are we going to give them access, or are we going to do a screen share? And then we're talking, and now we get back into time and energy. If we're doing a screen share, that's going to slow things down, so you keep it like on site. But then now we have to factor that in. Are we going to give them, like with our suppliers, some of our suppliers aren't comfortable with electronic access. Are they only going to let the auditor do a screen share? But these are things that we can talk through. You know, hey, can we put documents in a location for you that you can look at? Even if we're an electronic management system, we still may want to do that because it gives the auditor time to read it at their leisure and then come back and ask questions. I still think screen sharing after you've done that is a benefit. Put your records electronically somewhere, let them read through them at their leisure, and then, okay, let's talk through this process as procedure so we can look at the things together. The next thing, which is important, is interaction. Picking the platform. Are you going to use Zoom, WebEx, BlueJeans? You can use the Windows platform. I recommend something that has breakout rooms. If you don't, that way, you know, you can still do the side conversations, but you can come back to a main conversation. You may want breakout rooms as a back room. You may want to hold a separate platform for your back room, what you would normally serve as back room where you're chatting. These are things to think through. And then staying online. I also recommend staying online. I did a notified body audit this year where and again, what you'll learn through this today is that you may need to drive the conversation. We kind of expect the external bodies to have a process, and they're going to be getting it, but we can also drive into the conversation. And so we had an audit with a notified body, and they didn't want to stay online the whole time. They wanted to get the procedures electronically, read them, and then email us. And in hindsight, one of my takeaways was I want to keep them online to have a dialogue. I'd rather, even if they read it for a little bit and let's say, hey, let's jump back on in an hour and let's go through those procedures, let's go through the questions, let's screen share. Let's bring some of that in-person intimacy back into it. Otherwise, it just starts to kind of diverge. And I think that just sets it up for future, everything they read starts to kind of snowball in that light versus coming back together and being able to work together to understand how your organization does something versus how they might be reading it in a two-dimensional scenario. So when we're planning, we have to make decisions, and these are the decisions you're going to make with the in your organization before you start talking to the full team that's going to be covered in the audit. You need to think through, so then we can now talk to the auditing bodies, whether it's an internal audit, a supplier audit, or an external body audit. So our next stage, after we've done our assessment, we've done some planning, given what we know in assessing, now we can plan what platform we want, we can make decisions. Now we need to start preparing. And some of that preparation I've hinted to a little bit is, talking to the auditor around, do we need to negotiate more time? Here's the time we were planning. Does this work for you? We'd like to break it up over 5 days, 4 hours every day, or 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, or we want to do a solid 8 hour. Let's get out of what's been set. I mean, we do the 8 hours a lot of times in organizations because we had to travel there or it's convenient. I don't know that it serves us anymore. I don't know that we have to. So I think trying to break out of that in these remote audit scenarios and put it out there as a possibility and test it is a worthwhile conversation, especially, maybe your external bodies won't be open to it. Maybe they will be, maybe they haven't thought about it. But in internal and suppliers, certainly, right? Because that way, it addresses the food thing. No, I'm just kidding. And that way we can just kind of work our way through it, not be too, sitting in a Zoom meeting for 8 hours or an online meeting for 8 hours can be a little bit over strenuous for people. And again, with an auditing situation, we want to focus the audit on the content and make sure we do as much as we can to manage the personal to minimize and not have that come into the audit. So the next things we want to do as we prepare, now that you have your plan, is to prepare the organization. We're going to sit down. We're going to figure out which parts of the organization are going to be impacted, have a meeting with them so we can talk through all the decisions we made, help them understand the remote audit approach. And we should really make sure to explain it really clearly, the differences and what you've done to now to prepare and what the plans are you're going to do to help deploy it and help them be comfortable. When you have internal teams that are going to be audited, in quality, we get really comfortable with audits, but the other people need to bring that comfort. We're going to change a lot of things for them going remotely. So what we'd like to do is prepare them for that change, talk them through the difference that you've perceived and that you've gathered, and then tell them all the great things you're doing to prepare them and make it seamless and not take too much of their time. Again, if we're doing internal audits, our other team members, as we know, it's hard enough to get audits scheduled and impact people's time. Remote audits, we want to really make sure we are efficient and effective and doing the best we can and helping people know that we're doing everything we can to make this efficient and effective for them. So when we talk to them, we're going to need to help them understand, here's the agenda. So let's go through these 5 points. Here's the agenda and flow of the audit. Here's when you will likely be called upon. And the reality is with remote, we should be more on time. Sometimes with in-person, we can digress and move toward things because of the tour, but with the remote, we should be able to be on track a little bit more if we've scheduled this with taking into consideration when review is going to happen and when conversations are going to happen. We need to help them know how document review is going to happen, help them know what they can share and how to share it, and if you're going to be with them and how they can dialogue with you so they feel safe and comfortable. Because remember now, not only most of your team is still going to be remote, even if maybe a portion of the audit, you might have an on-site person doing a tour, for example. Most of the team is still remote and without you. In the past, they've had the comfort of their quality or regulatory person keeping them comfortable. So in this case, let's talk to the team, help them understand, help them know which medium we're going to be using. If you're going to use a whiteboard app, help them start using it so they can be comfortable using it. They need to think about, also remind your team about confidentiality and what the boundaries are and what the sharing are. What are we emailing? What are we putting electronically? What are we screen sharing? What's allowed in dialogue? Some of that is normal on-site practice, but now you have electronic interaction that's a little different than in the past. And then when we get through how the documents are going to be reviewed, we want to help them know, stay online with them or give them a minute. Then we move into the record review and storage. You've told them how we're going to give the auditors access. You're going to let them know how you let you know what they got to see. And then we need to talk about the process tour and the product show. So a lot of times somebody will walk an auditor through the organization. How are we going to do that now? We can have somebody with a camera. Just think through the platform. Are you going to have somebody with a GoPro on? Some people think, well, I can just walk around my phone. Try it, practice it. It's hard to do a video tour with stability, keeping your arm up, keeping the flow consistent. Because you have to remember, while you're showing the screen, you're not showing yourself. So you have to just kind of think through, and we'll talk about one of the steps is going to be doing a run through. How do we want to give them the comfort and sense as if they were here with us in person, but they're remote. And I think, one of the big things with auditors is you don't want to hide anything. So if we can do a tour, the product show, when you're in your design audit a lot of the time, or your regulatory review, a lot of times you have a physical product. How are we going to answer that in person, so that the person, or remotely, so that your team member who's supporting remotely now knows what they can do. Are we going to ship them some product ahead of time? Are we going to have a slideshow with the product examples? Are we going to whiteboard the product? So having your team know how the auditor will be able to see the product, and then lots of times when you're auditing, you're going to want to go back and look at the product again. So what's going to be this option that they can look at or go to that's going to give them that same ability when they're auditing? Same with the process tour. I think if you do a tour, if you do a video tour, maybe you record it so they can go back and look at it. And it's, it can be deleted or it can be stored and, has limited access. These are things to think through and practice. And again, then the final interaction at the beginning, I'm gonna keep bringing food up because I've noticed over this last 9 months, it's definitely something we forget about. And keeping people healthy and sane, we forget because they're remote. We're not there with them every day. We're not seeing, oh wait, you need to stop, take a break, get out, stretch. Both for the team being audited as well as the auditor, we need to think about that for them. We need to plan that for them. They won't self-care, and then that's gonna degrade the quality of the audit. So interaction, helping your team know to look into the camera, help them modulate their voice. Make sure that they have a video system that's working so they're not in a dark cave and the auditor can't see them, right? We want this to be as much like in person as possible. Have them interact, have them have conversation. Let's not make it transactional. Because when we're electronic, it can move to just transactional pretty quickly. It can move to, here's your stuff, let me know what you need. We need to keep that relationship piece going so that the auditor has trust and can ask questions and things move smoother. When we're off in our own world, we create dialogue, we create assumptions. And what we want to do is try to minimize that as much as possible. So as we're wrapping into our preparation, whether we're an internal supplier or external body audit, all those things I just mentioned are going to be unique for each situation. There's, again, there's overlap, and then there's pieces that only come into play when it's an internal audit or a supplier audit or an external body audit. I think our suppliers are going to need the most help. Our suppliers have, honestly, most of them are in the most paper burdensome systems. And we're going to need to help them figure out how to manage these audits and work in technology a little bit more. Some of the bigger suppliers, sure, but a lot of organizations are still using the small suppliers. A lot of organizations, if you're a large organization that you've purchased, are using the small suppliers. So we need to help them know and plan. And so, getting on the phone with them, dialoguing the setup, dialoguing what they're comfortable with, testing it, which is my final step, is doing a test run of everything we've just talked through. Get your agenda, get your processes set up, and test run. Whether if it's an internal audit, have another department fill in or have your auditors test each other just to get the platform up, get the electronic system going, get this, the breakout rooms going, get the dialogue pieces going, really test run it. Make sure that people can dial in, the tech is working. I mean, you don't want tech problems the day of the audit, just like you don't want tech problems on the day of a webinar. You want to just take that piece out. There's enough discomfort in audits. What we want to do is get rid of this discomfort. And this is new, right? Auditing isn't new, but doing it remotely while everybody's got all this stuff going on and keeping their attention is new. So work through it, do a test run, test your assessment, your plan, your preparation, and your team. Make sure that the soft skills are working, the team's communicating, and again, that you're, depending on which audit type you're doing, internal, supplier, or external, we want to just walk through each of the steps. And again, I think I'm sensitive to suppliers. Bring them in, have part of the conversation, make sure that their tech is working, and that all the pieces are comfortable and everybody can dialogue and work together. I was thinking about, when I think back to that audit I was mentioning that was on a different time zone, I'm glad that it was me, my team that was on the time zone. I'm not glad for my team. That was definitely hard. Figuring out as a leader how to take care of your team that's running from midnight to 8 to support an audit is part of why we're having this dialogue is things to think about. And I definitely could have done better. But thinking, I'm glad that it was us versus the notified body, right? I want to create that balance and that comfort, and we have to figure out how to bring that to everybody. And think about it for suppliers. How do we help them do their best and show their best and get comfortable? So to sum up, the 4 steps are: we're going to assess, we're going to plan, we're going to prepare, and then we're going to do a test run. And then we're going to be class and quality people, and we're going to bring a 5th step in that I didn't include initially, and we're going to debrief. I think for the next year at least, we need to talk about lessons learned. We need to think about, in each case, whether it's after each audit or maybe every quarter, you get your whole team together. What did we learn from our remote internal supplier or external body audit? What are our 2 differentlies? What are our tweaks? What worked really great that everybody can learn from? And really just knowledge share that into the organization. You'll iterate faster, as we all know. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir right now. We all love to iterate and continuously improve, and I think this is a place to do it. We just have to keep trying things. We're going to fail on some aspects of it. I think these steps will help you start off on a good foot, when you assess and plan, prepare, and test run. But then please, let's debrief, let's tweak and help the whole organization improve. And it doesn't need to be a process. I just think, I think it's inherent right now just to debrief after these audits and share those experiences. What platforms worked, what breakout rooms worked, what whiteboard app worked, what touring options worked, what way of sharing records and sharing procedures worked. How do we take care of our auditors? What agenda and flow worked best for you and your organization? We recently did an article, 6 tips for remote auditing. You can find that on our website if you like. If you have more questions, please share your experience. This is Greenlight's hashtag. I'd love you to share how this information was for you. And now we're going to open it up to questions. Kennedy, I'll let you help me on that front if we have questions that people are interested in covering.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Nicolle, for that. I'm getting several comments about how there's a lot of tips that people are taking and saying, that's really useful information. So some of the questions I'm seeing, I've seen this one a few times. How much extra time do you recommend for companies to build into audits? What are you seeing from your experience?
Right now, this year, it's been double. Yeah, twice the time for the audit part. And I think that's without these steps. So I think taking these steps will help you not spend that much time, but if you try and go into it cold, we've seen just so much time spent trying to figure out how to show records, that sometimes the organization will have 2 or 3 people socially distanced with masks trying to support an on-site audit remotely. So they're on-site together, and then the auditor's remote, and it's just, those are things to figure out. That takes time, right? Getting records and getting them scanned takes time. Figuring out, even when they're on an electronic system, figuring out where to give the access to the auditor. Am I sharing a screen? So now if I'm sharing a screen with you, I can't dialogue with anybody else. There's not, so then breakout room. So if you don't do any of these steps, double the time.
Okay, great. I have another question from John asking, how will notified bodies view companies that have not done their internal audits, either on-site or remote, but have put in a documented COVID-19 mitigation in place for 2020? Are you seeing NCs issued for something like this?
That's a good question, John. I haven't seen NCs because we've been doing them remotely. I haven't seen, I think their expectation is that you continue to maintain I think putting a COVID policy, absolutely, but at some point it stops being the thing that's stopping you. So if you're putting a COVID policy in because your whole organization stopped and went on furlough, we certainly have clients like that, and nothing was moving forward, but maybe you were maintaining complaints for the stuff that was out there. And then at some point when you went back into business, it's time to start things back up and show that. So I think as long as it's reasonable, they're going to be reasonable with it, and you had a plan. I'm not seeing an NC for, stopping, here's what we did, and then now we're starting. I think if you stop and don't ever start, or don't have a conversation about when you're starting or when's reasonable, that would be where the notified body's not going to negotiate out of that NC.
Okay, great. The next question I have is from Jim, and he is asking about what's the efficacy of remote audit versus in person. First, is it generally accepted during COVID? Are you finding, similar results and things like that? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're auditing and the content. There's definitely been a couple of, so I'll talk about some internal and supplier audits that we've done. So there's some internal audits early in COVID that we suggested, let's wait until later because we're still optimistic things are going to get back up, because we need to be on site to see those things. And it wouldn't be the right thing to do to try to say we captured a full audit. And in other times, what we did was we've done a partial audit. So here we audited all these things, but we really need to get on site to see these things. So let's schedule that in this date. And now as we approach those dates, if we still can't get on site, we need that next tip, which I think is somebody going on site with a video, which will deal with part of that. I think that's how we've started to deal with bridging that gap. So we have suppliers that we will go audit, and we have a lot of clients that need to see them, and we'll send one person in to keep everybody safe, right? So then the auditor is one person, the company has one person. And now we can bridge that gap versus having all these companies go in and putting everybody at risk. If we can minimize how many people are going in and send one person in, we can video and we can protect that video. That's how we start bridging that gap and thinking outside the box to figure out how can we do this with what's at play now, and we don't see changing, especially, at least where I live right now, they just tightened up everything. So we're getting super creative. Because I'm with you, I think there's a point you can't close the book on an audit if you can't see everything. So you got to figure out, either pause it and say, okay, these things couldn't be addressed, we will do it in the next quarter, because our assumption is things will get back, and then now we've learned, oh, that didn't happen, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to have somebody video, or we're going to have one person go on site and look at this.
Okay, great. So I'm seeing a couple questions about money. Are you seeing notified bodies charge extra because these audits are taking longer? Or what are you seeing from kind of the more business side of things?
Yeah, on the notified body audits, I haven't seen them make that adjustment yet, and I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I think right now they're living with it. I think they're hoping, like everything, we get more efficient once we do things. So I think they're getting, it's a learning curve, and they haven't started to shift and make people pay for it. I think if things don't shift as a business, they will then start asking for it, but I'm not seeing it right now.
I'm seeing another group of questions around the remote platforms to conduct the audits. So have you ever seen auditors ask for verification and validation of these platforms? And is there any concern on privacy with some of these platforms, like people taking screenshots or being able to hack into these audits or something like that?
Yeah, the first question, no, I haven't seen notified bodies go there. And, if this becomes a long-term solution, we'll start creating expectations on that. Right now, the notified bodies they're using their platform. So what I've seen is they will invite you to theirs. So I think they're feeling more safe in that way. For the rest of, screenshots, I don't think that's coming into the dialogue. I think, again, those are going to be long-term concerns. Right now, I think a lot of people are trying to function in, we're trying to do the best we can. We're trying not to think that these bad things are happening, like hacking. I know that, the reality is that we do need to think about them, but they aren't coming into play in the conversation just yet. Again, I think those are going to come in if this is going to be a long-term solution. But short-term, they are not entering into the dialogue. I think there's enough that they're trying to cover, especially notified bodies with the MDR shift, managing remotely. I don't think they're trying to tackle these pieces that we know will come up if this is going to be a long-term solution. But for emergencies and for right now, I think they're tabling that. It's not coming up.
Okay. So the next set of questions I'm seeing are around tours. So are there best practices around conducting a tour remotely, both from a notified body side, as well as potentially if you're auditing a supplier? So from both sides, what have you seen that's worked?
Yeah. I think kind of a two-part solution. I think doing some kind of GoPro, which whoever's wearing it is not going to love you for it. I mean, and unless you're an organization that can have one of those cool robots. I mean, hands down, those are pretty cool. But I don't, I think just having a supplier, the more active, if, and a phone is fine, it's hard, but if, I'm going to go down to supplier first. So if you want a supplier, say, hey, will you stand up, walk around, and then that they're walking and showing you the concern about them hiding things from you is low. If somebody else can be there, even better. And if occasionally you can stop, you can look at the person and then they can walk. You can get a little seasick, so that's why I kind of go to more of a stable solution. But again, that all goes up with price. I think at the end of the day, doing a walking tour builds trust, because then they can see, look, I'm walking over here. Okay, I'll stop and stand. Don't get seasick. Hold on, here I go. I'm gonna go in the clean room. Here's the outside. Stabilize for a minute and talk. If you can do kind of a maybe two people are logged into the platform. One is screen sharing with their camera. One person is the one dialoguing. Then you can be in a conversation together. That works really nice. Record it. I think record it while you're doing it. Figure out how to cover the NDAs. You can certainly only share it for a certain amount of time, but then you can go back to it. And it can be recorded. You can keep it and you can play it as a screen share. Like, okay, remember when we went over here, or the auditor can ask, hey, can you go back and show me that part when you were in, the manufacturing line with the laser? Can you zoom in on that? Or can you have somebody go back over there and zoom in? But at least the tool will get you started, and then you may need to go back and do some deeper pictures or some deeper zoom ins later.
All right, great, thanks. So we have time for one more question, a quick one. I'm seeing this from Pavla, and it's asking, what's the best way to coordinate the audit team if all members work at the home office? Have you seen best practices around that, challenges, things like that?
You mean the whole team is on site and there's a remote?
Well, a coordination of the audit team so if you have people in multiple locations, is there a good way to manage all of that?
Yeah, definitely use a platform that has breakout rooms so that you can, during the audit, you guys can have side conversations, and you need a chat function. Before the audit, the test runs, getting people on the call, checking, maybe if you have somebody who's more of a coordinator, teeing up everybody ahead of time, making sure everything's working. Here's what we found during the audit, kind of just like a webinar series, like 10 minutes before they're supposed to come on, have your coordinator get with that person. Okay, looks like we're looking good. Why don't you pull up, make sure everything's working for you. Here's what we're doing. We've made some shifts. This is going to be a breakout room. Natalia is going to join you, and this is where the records are, just like we planned. Or here's what we plan and these are the shifts. So I would say use a program that has breakout rooms, coordinate to get them on the call beforehand, but even way before that, plan and discuss and who's going to have the devices, who's going to do whiteboarding.
Okay, great. So with that,
I know you said we had a little bit.
okay. Yeah, with that, we're at time. So thank you so much, Nicolle, for sharing your knowledge on this. Really appreciated it. And thank you all. Hopefully you will join our next session.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny.
Right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
All right, have a good one.